Hello, welcome to Sustainable Scottsdale. I'm Anthony Floyd, the Green Building Program Manager for the city, as well as the Energy Code Specialist. And I'm really delighted I have the honor to have a discussion with our mayor, David Ortega, who's also an architect, and I find a lot of interest, and over the years we have discussed many things, and I'm trained as an architect as well. So, welcome, Mayor. Once again, it's indeed an honor. And we were talking earlier about your experience. You graduated from the University of Arizona with a degree in architecture, and you moved to the Phoenix area in the late 70s to work under Benny Gonzalez, who's a prominent, regionally known, if not nationally and internationally known architect, who also designed the City Hall, Library, and the Arts Center. Can you start off by just telling us about your experience and what you learned from Benny Gonzalez?
Well, thank you, Anthony. I'm delighted to be here as well. And as a fellow architect and now on City Council, we are continuously looking at the man-built environment and the natural environment. So Scottsdale is a beautiful pairing of both of those. The Ortega family goes back many generations in the Sonoran Desert, and we always have had to adapt to our surroundings. When I came here as a young architect fresh out of college, I was amazed by a big city. For me, Scottsdale, 8,000 people was 80,000 people was big. I moved from a small town of 8,000 people. And my first job opportunity was with Benny Gonzalez. And he is the architect for the City Hall, actually for the Center for the Arts building. And these were exciting times for a young architect. But I also learned about building, designing in the desert. He was also a landscape architect, so he was involved in the grounding and siting of his buildings. And that's particularly important, here in Scottsdale. Really helped put Scottsdale on the map and gave us the identity that we enjoy today.
Yeah, I admire his architecture, and I wish he had more of it around. Very unique style, very responsive to our desert environment and our region.
He was a character also, and
I've
Benny was
heard.
an artist and an
Yeah.
architect. Um, he was really grounded in knowing that architecture has to respond to the sun. It has to respond to a scarcity of materials if it really fits in our desert environment. So I became as an apprentice very aware of how to design with all those considerations: deep set windows, shading elements, and making the area very walkable.
So, with that experience, particularly as a young architect, I'm sure you were very influenced by Benny. So, through your architectural practice and your other activities throughout your career, how do you see buildings being responsive to the desert, particularly the Southwest? And because we're in a very fragile, diverse desert, the Sonoran Desert, how do you see buildings responding respectively to the environment?
Well, for Arizona and for Scottsdale, our identity is mainly with adobe and solid materials, and also a lot of shading elements that are needed. So we're not Pittsburgh, we're not Seattle. We don't have an identity of steel, glass, and that kind of construction. And I think that's what I learned and what I carry forward with my architecture. Also, you have to be very cognizant of our Southwest culture that could have began with the Pueblo and the Hohokam natives, who also dealt with scarcity and so forth. So in a way, our buildings can be an oasis from the heat, should be shading elements, and then we can enjoy the veranda aspect. Yes, as an architect, I've designed many buildings, and just speaking about Old Town buildings, buildings that needed to fit within that Southwest culture and kind of expectation. By doing so, I think they fit in and make people feel more familiar to Scottsdale when they come here. And that's the value of what I call the core or original township of Scottsdale. And it begins on Main Street, but also stretches all the way to Civic Center and then northward to the Arizona Canal. So that's the perspective that I bring. It's been fun being an architect, a professional architect in Scottsdale, and now I have a leadership position. And we're doing quite a few bond programs and other improvements to our civic center area. So I love being here in this position to have my input and kind of remind the team, where we came from, where we're going, and Benny has a contemporary feel to his work. It does not have to be old time or old looking in any way, to be very, very relevant and attractive.
So you've been active throughout your career. In addition to being former council member, I believe from 2000 2004 on City Council you served. You also served on the Development Review Board, the Downtown Architectural Guidelines, Arizona State Energy Efficiency Committee. How do all of those experiences relate to you as a mayor now?
Sure. There was another building type. I was on the Arizona School Facilities Board, and nine-member board, only one architect. That was me for 6 years, and we allocated about $420 million every year for new classroom buildings and facilities. So it was amazing, a position that amounted to about 23 schools a year for that 5-6 year period that I was on that board. Energy efficiency was built into all of those decisions of the building envelope, these terms that we're familiar with. But also, when I served on DR board, and I was very direct about it. When I saw a case come in, let's say an auto display room or whatever, and it was a national footprint, they would place it in Chicago and whatever, this major dealership. And they, in one case, had it facing west with 20 foot of glass, which would literally bake everyone in there. And I came out pretty strong about it. I said, let's do some screening there, if you can change the orientation. And it has to be adaptable. Otherwise, we're just wasting resources, and it won't pay off as well for the comfort level of the customers, or residences have to be planned that way as well. One thing that I admire about you, Anthony, is over a period of time, I've gone to many AIA conventions. They may be in San Francisco or Chicago, Atlanta, and who do I run into in Philadelphia? Okay, there's Anthony Floyd. I think your sister was with you, and here's a Scottsdale person committed to sustainability, and we're in the sharing mode, right? Whatever we learn among architects or among cities, we want to share. And frankly, the ideas may come from Israel, or it may come from India or Brazil, and so forth. And that's how we all gain from that. So I always got a kick out of finding you. I don't know why or how I could find you so easy in a crowd of whatever it was, 1,500, 3,000 architects. But I really enjoyed each time.
Well, it was great running into you too. And sharing all of the new technology and materials, particularly for energy efficiency and green building. It's very important. I'm curious, how do you think our founding members of our community, how they would envision the growth and development, but particularly of the natural and built environment? And a lot has happened, since the 50s, and how we have grown as a community. But do you think our founding members of the community would be happy with what we have today, or would they improve it, or would they like to see something else, or they're happy with it?
Well, the history of Scottsdale, Winfield, Scott, and so forth was agricultural at first, and because they had access to some water, and when the canal system was built, uh, that brought about some commerce and so forth. For Phoenix, it's the same story for Pittsburgh. They're on a waterway, right, or two waterways,
Yeah.
and that's a natural area for commerce. But the bigger issue is, Scottsdale is a crossroads for talent and investment. People may see opportunity in agriculture or business, and they bring their talents to Arizona. Sometimes certain practices of, or let's say plant materials that don't belong here were brought here, and that use too much water do not belong here. Or an idea that the water is just you can leave it running and so forth. So there have been some transformations from the Bermuda grass lawns, both by city and xeriscaping, encouraging that usage. And the one rule that I always, there's probably four rules, gravity, sun, water, and scarcity. Scarcity is what I taught my children. It's always, hey, do you think the lights are, running forever? Or, there's always a scarcity of everything. Classroom space, education, teachers, transportation, and certainly materials and energy. So I think that's the consciousness that people have to come to. When people arrived here, it was a very small population. As we grow, we have to learn more about sustainability to make things work and fit in our environment, as well as the man-built environment, person-built environment.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Where we live, work, and play.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. So buildings, let me say first that we live in challenging times, and particularly in regards to the environment. And there's a lot of talk about climate change and things that we can do to reduce greenhouse gases.
Yeah.
What role do you think buildings can play in combating climate change?
Well, I can speak as an architect, and I can speak as a mayor, right? And I'm an architect mayor, so that's a good place to cover this. My belief as an architect is what I design eventually may get knocked down, maybe 50 years from now or 100 years from now, but it's got to serve the best purpose and serve the owners and users of that. So it's going to last the test of time. And part of my belief as a mayor, and we're in a big bond project cycle where we've got $320 million worth of new construction and improvements, new parks and so forth. So, my feeling about climate change, my position as an architect and now as mayor is, I want to improve the world one city at a time, right? And that city is our hometown, Scottsdale. And whatever I can do, and the council, I believe, is quite conscious of these factors, and we're going to be including discussion of that and sustainability in the general plan, which is in process right now. That's something that will come from all the stakeholders, understanding that we don't like pollution. We want to, make sure our recycling and other energy use is encouraged as a city corporation, among individuals, and then as a city as a whole. So it is really top of mind, and we can only do what we can in our city and the best we can in our city. And if more cities do that, I think eventually we'll have a better county, better state, and a better world.
There's a lot has happened over the last 10, 20 years. We started the Green Building Program in 1998. And I remember at that time there wasn't much availability of alternative materials, energy efficient materials. The cost of solar was very high. How do you think the industry and the private sector is faring or progressing? Do you think that they're playing a stronger role now in helping to reduce energy use and greenhouse gas emission? Do you think architectural products and materials and the role that they play can help improve our environment?
Well, I think the green building program certainly raised the conscious level within our city, and then provided some incentives for builders and others to use and employ some better methods. The that has improved, I believe, in many ways, our life cycle factors and renewable resources, where we're, whether the private sector is using those enough is a challenge, because so many times it's a matter of building in haste and however, the new building codes, international building codes, do have provisions for that. So we are more conscious as architects. I believe when you look at the early origins of organic architecture, whether Benny Gonzalez was doing it with his shading elements and double walls and other insulation factors, or Frank Lloyd Wright believed in projected, again, shading elements. Those things can be understood by everybody, and I love talking to any classroom about it, where there are people that are wondering, how can we protect our oceans, protect our mountains, and add to our quality of life. So it is a quality of life issue, and I think, as mayor, I want to make sure that I always ask those questions. Why so much glass, and why not look at something that's more adaptable? In many ways, glass and steel is a cheaper way to build. That's one reason why it was used so much in high rises. Glass is made out of sand, the most plentiful silica element really on Earth. But nevertheless, without getting into that too deeply, there's other factors and coatings and other things that will make it better. For Scottsdale, I think there's a certain low profile, low density that we prefer, and that's part of our heritage. It's worth understanding, and it's worth being very conscious of. So Scottsdale's never been a place for 20-story buildings or large reflective buildings, and I think that's what the people will want. More low profile, low density, walkable, pedestrian, shaded pathways. I hope that we can get deeper into that as we converse. It's a pleasure to be mayor and to be in this position. I'm going to have to stop myself, Anthony, because we can keep going about this.
Well, I want to let you know that we are planning to adopt the latest building codes.
Yeah.
The 2021 edition, because every 3 years the whole family of codes come out.
Right.
And as a part of those codes is the energy code, as well as the green construction code. So we will continue under your leadership to adopt and enforce this standard for our community, so that we can reduce energy use and greenhouse gas emissions and reduce water consumption and have better indoor air quality. I think all of these things are good for our community.
I will say that, as these new buildings come online, we have, high standards for that. And the green building is an alternative to the LEED system of LEED rating. That one is very good, but it's also very expensive and can lead to other kind of audits and so forth. And I understand it pretty well. So when we talk about green and the green building program, that movement that you've been involved with, for the last 30 plus years, is really not just a consciousness. It has good rules, but it's not as arduous or expensive as other kinds of auditing for energy performance. And I do support that. I believe the IBC 2021 will be coming out. I'm a little concerned about one thing, which I will raise sometimes. Of course, the benefit of all the energy conservation may be 20 or 30%, on your utility bill or your water usage. That's wonderful. One of the problems that I have, or a little pushback, is that, well, if it saves you 20 or 30%, but then you're allowed 20 or 30% more density, you end up not really saving much in the net world.
As a trade-off, you're talking about the trade-offs.
And I don't know if
building.
that trade-off, if it's still treading water, when at the same time, any commercial user or landlord or hospital and just the city as a whole, is if they're reaping a reward of 20 to 30%, that can stand on its own without pumping up the density or height, because if the net result is, again, greater density, then you're on the losing side of it. So that's a little pushback. It might be a little technical to say that, but the intent I totally believe in. I think the incentives are pocketbook incentives, both to the city and to the private sector and to the pseudo-private sector, schools, of course, and we're all very conscious of it. And those are the rewards for us all.
I think as a community, we've been a leader over the years since starting our green building program in '98.
Right.
So we have a lot of experience with it. And over time, we have integrated many of these measures because it's been tested and proven, and we've incorporated it into our building codes. And so we've seen energy provisions like that, as well as water and indoor environmental quality.
I saw that years ago when I was councilman. A project came forward and they wanted a straw bale school.
Yes.
And of course, so they already have brick schools and they have wood schools. They wanted straw schools.
Yeah.
But in fact, they were post and beam kinds of structures.
Infill.
And then
for the straw
infill.
bale.
And great insulation, and you could shoot arrows on it, and target shooting. It was great. No, but even that solution was innovative and good use.
So we've always allowed for innovative materials and new technologies in the city. But I think we're moving towards green building becoming a standard.
Yes.
So that everyone can benefit from it, not just the few, but everyone. Just a few other things I want to mention and bring into the conversation, and is some of the new technology that we have, and that's coming online, and growing trends.
Yes.
And one is EV, electric vehicles, and preparing for the increasing amount of EVs on the road. And I'm wondering what your views are on preparing by having EV charging stations, or at least having infrastructure in place for new construction, so that when they're ready to put in an EV charger, the electrical capacity is there within the building that it's designed in. I think it's easier to do for new construction, but what's your take on the future of electric vehicles?
Well, electric vehicles are certainly part of the present and future and will play a larger role. But if you're talking about the future, you have to talk about the biggest seismic event that's happened, which was the COVID pandemic. So last year, it hit worldwide, and there were already trends, right? There were trends for alternate fuels. There were trends for alternate transportation. There were trends even for work at home. There were trends for 100% plan review online. And all of that, those were trends, but nobody expected Scottsdale, Arizona to end up turning to such a large acceleration of that trend. Basically, in 10 months, we shut down the front counter and took counter, all digital.
Digital
and we
submittals,
tested
yeah.
it out. It was like a stress test, right?
Yes.
The biggest trend change in that also was the work from home element. Now, probably futurists expected work from home to maybe evolve over the next 10 or 15 years to perhaps be as much as 10% of the workforce. Well, we ended up with 80% of it having to test that because of COVID, right? So it accelerated the event and the trend that was already happening. When we look at EV vehicles and think, well, we have to go to a central headquarters in Phoenix to work, or we have to go to a central headquarters at APS or SRP, and we're commuting for Scottsdale, well, electric batteries and all that, seems to make sense to reduce the pollution. But now, after COVID, those corporations have tested a work from home model that they expected to kind of gradually roll out. And in some cases, I know entire divisions that have been told, you don't have to come back to work. You don't have to drive 15 miles, 20 miles
Right.
each way to downtown Phoenix. So one of the largest attorney firms in the state, they have 17 floors out on Washington, and with the COVID, they were reduced to 3 floors. I happen to know the person that runs their IT, and he's a young guy. He's 35-year-old that runs all that. Guess what? They're making more money. Their billables are higher. Everybody, and they're working from home to do that. So they have left 14 floors empty, and now they're considering leaving it that way.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when you look at that and the impact of that trend, we're now looking as architects at, hey, how can we make your work from home office look and work great? Educationally, schools got tested with the same pressure. COVID caused an acceleration of online learning. So yeah, you have online earning, right?
Yeah.
So students, and I know that it's important to have, social contact, and of course schools are going back with other adaptable forms. But as you go up in high school, there's more online testing, online learning, and of course college has that. So when you mention trends and what's happening, it is true that EV vehicles are part of it, but the world is changing quite a bit. I have a hybrid myself, and whatever. It's kind of very, very quiet vehicle, but we do expect to have a certain number of charging stations, and our fleet of waste garbage trucks and so forth. It's alternate fuels as well, but all of these steps, it's always in a moving. It's going in the right direction, but we've also got to adjust to that. In my opinion, it means a sustainable neighborhood, the sustainable home, the sustainable parks, and all the areas that we enjoy while we're working at home. Or even if they're going to work 2 days a week only, then it's very important for me as mayor and as architect to say, let's work on that neighborhood where we're going to be most of the time and where people choose to be. Even after the pandemic settles down, and let's just say it's only 30% working from home, that's a substantial gain that projected maybe 20 years into the future. And that's really a good model to work with.
Mm-hmm.
And I expect to hear more from you, Anthony, on better ways to improve our city, because it does start in our own, home
Mm-hmm.
shelter, I've worked on rehab facilities where you can get better, hospital facilities where you get well, schools, all those models that make up our beautiful city.
Well, as a follow-up to that, what role do you think rooftop solar will play, particularly if people are spending more time at home? Do you see a future of solar rooftop installations as being a trend?
Well, there's been a huge reduction in costs from the original solar, installations, I believe I've seen that popping up in my neighborhood, and we certainly see it. When you say rooftop, it could be a covered car canopy,
Yes.
Shade structure. The City of Scottsdale, and part of our bond 2019, has rooftop over there at the corporation yard, and that's definitely part of our corporate plan. And I believe,
Yes.
Many nonprofits and schools have adapted and adopted that. Truth is, things do wear out, and the solar EV panels will degrade a bit, and there's a good and important area of jobs, of monitoring, of make improvements, and so forth. So it is an absolute part of our economy, and it's going to continue to provide jobs and opportunities for everyone. They'll work out the storage, that's the other side.
Battery
of it.
storage is
Right,
the other part of it.
battery
Yeah,
storage
yeah.
and how that works
Yeah.
out.
Okay, I have two more questions for
Oh.
you. Okay. And we'll wrap up, because I know we could talk all afternoon
Right.
for another few hours. What individual actions can citizens take in respecting the environment?
Wow. I think when I look at the sunrise in the morning and go out for a walk, or a sunset, we can appreciate our being and our family and what we're grateful for. I think that as an individual, it's a very personal thing, and I think that as a city, we can build in a greater environment. In many cases, I can tell you, people they go to dog parks religiously. They enjoy a conversation. Sometimes it's only a conversation with their pet, and when they get to go out there, it's an awareness, I think, and we are the environment, right? Human beings. So it's wonderful that we approach that, and it's been a difficult year. So I believe that really our mental health and reaching out to each other helps create the natural environment, which is our own humanity, that's as important as the built environment, as the desert environment, is how we are as a community. And what we have is a covenant with each other when we're in a city. And that's an important value that I think is very natural and God-given, that's part of what makes our city a wonderful place.
Thank you. And finally, how can Scottsdale become a world-class city for demonstrating sustainability?
Right. We've touched on the green building program, but the major way that I have been successful as an architect and intend to be successful as mayor is that we need client input, right? We have a project, or we have a site, we know where the sun angles are, we see where the water sources are. We don't want to turn our back to neighbors. We want to make things flow well. And so that's the input that we expect to get from a client, and sometimes it means pushing back on somebody that wants to do something that's out of place, or let's just say not energy efficient, or even culturally to blend in. As mayor, I see a similar situation, that we need to gather citizen input. It's called the general plan. It's part of how Scottsdale has evolved. It's a mandatory requirement. We're in that process right now. And as a member of the City Council, leading our group as mayor, I know that we will accomplish the general plan, which begins from everybody. It's businesses, churches, neighborhood groups, sports groups, certainly, of course, the business world, large corporations, small people, giving our best ideas, sharing, and there'll be some push points on it, but that's how they are the client. They are my client as mayor. They are my client as a member of the City Council. I do respect the staff that we have. I think there's a lot of specialists there that understand transportation and lots of other areas that are, that have to be handled in a very professional way. And so it begins with listening, then learning from what the input is and having the expertise and the training, seminars that are needed, going with the best practice, and I believe Scottsdale's been a leader in that, and then learning and sharing from actually mistakes as well as success. And I think that's how I'm approaching being mayor of the city and enjoying the role, and I think that's the leadership that when I'm imagining there's probably an Anthony Floyd in Albuquerque, or someone that's going to say someone in Colorado that's your cohort, and thinking about things in the same way, because we have to work for our sustainable future. And I'm glad to be a part of it, and look forward to sharing more with you in the future.
Thank you, Mayor. I will mention, just as a follow-up to something you said, related to the general plan, is that we do have our Scottsdale Environmental Commission that I believe is providing valuable input into the general plan update process. And I think we're looking pretty good in terms of our goals and that are set, particularly for improving our environment.
Right, and transportation element, human services element, certainly the environmental and sustainability is part of that. Our tourism area is a very big component of keeping the character and the assets that we have in the built environment and the McDowell-Sonoran Preserve are all very huge in our identity. We are a leader in that way, and I look forward. The whole process is rolling out for an adoption at least by May, and then it will go to the voters. So ultimately, we've taken 1,500 voices and comments and so forth. They don't always agree, but we're going to be formulating that general plan, and then it will go for a public vote in November as a standalone, saying, this is who we are, this is where we're coming from, these are our values that got us here, where we are presently, and will take us into the future. Mm-hmm. And that's the beauty of designing a city together. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Very good, very good. And this is all part of Earth Month that we celebrate every April.
Right.
And I think that this was a very good discussion. The theme this year is restoring the Earth for Earth Day. And I think many of the strategies that we discuss and that you're routing for and serving as leadership for will serve to do just that. So I have to tell you, Mayor, it was indeed a pleasure to sit down and talk to you, to really talk about some things in the past, but also where we are today and where we need to be in the future. So I really appreciate your leadership and discussing this topic with us.
Thank you very much, Anthony.
Okay.
We'll see you again.
Okay, thank you. So thank you for attending and watching Sustainable Scottsdale, and we look forward to seeing you soon.